Hey, my name is Zephyr, and today I'm going to show you a breakdown of my track, Sphere. It is completely free to download, and if you would like to get the MIDI files or the audio snips to this track and either follow along or break it down for your own personal study, you can find out more information down below by checking out my Patreon page, in which I release all these tracks for free to download, the MP3 version. But if you want to get more perks or download more or get a higher quality version of the wave, you can support me on Patreon and have access to all of those. So without further ado, let's get started. Alright, let's break it down. We'll start with our plug section here, and I'll show you the MIDI data I used. It's made in the key of C minor. A very kind of common type chord progression, but it's one that I always enjoy to work with. Once I found those MIDI notes and placed them in, the rest of the song is entirely an accumulation of me messing with those notes and slight variations. Pluck 1 is just the basic layers, kind of the bass. There's a little bit of low passing or high passing on the EQ, cutting out the lows. I'm running it through a compressor, which doesn't even like it's doing anything. Oh, it's doing a little bit. Yeah, it's doing a little bit. And that's just mostly to tame the lows, or tame the peaks, so it doesn't get out of hand. Kind of keeps the volume a little even. Some post EQ afterwards, in which I trim the 500 areas, and then I apply a high pass overall to it. The send right here is simply a way to volume automate or control the volume externally without having to use the mixer knob to do it. The second part of my layer is it is a more higher kind of frequency sort of layer, and it has a little bit more stuff going on with the delay, but it's typically just a more higher layer, which I trimmed out most of to add a little bit more of a presence to the pluck together. And then my third layer here, Pluck 3, is just the final kind of layer that gives it a little bit more kind of body to the entire sound. Just some EQ and running it through a high pass as well. And all together it sounds like this. Alright, next up I'm going to approach the Arps and how I mixed and did that. First off, there's the MIDI notes that I used. This is the same MIDI data as the Plucks, except that I removed most of the bass notes from the bottom, to keep it out, because I don't really need them. Just the Arps is more of the upper version of the the melody, or the chord progression, I should say. And we can give a listen to it here. There's Arp 1. can't really hear it. That's better. And what this does, it just kind of adds a little bit of atmosphere to your track here. I'm a big fan of using Arps. I use them almost all the time, especially stuff like this. And a lot of my Arps always entails, you know, having like some extra effects layered on top of them, because I really enjoy that entire process. It's one of my favorite things to do. There is a little bit of EQ applied here, and then there's some volume automation, which this is what I use to externally control the volume. Nothing too crazy. The second ARP sound here, this is kind of the more of the main pad sound element that's going through the track. And you can look here, it is used, it's just an expand. I think all these ARPs are actually expand, by the way. I use expand for this. It's a preset, and then I automate usually the cutoff for these. Looking at our mixer track here, I have it just ran through an EQ, of course, and then there is some delay I added onto that with a low pass, post EQ afterwards, external volume here, and then there's a little bit of stereo applied to these because I want these not in the center as much as I want them a little bit wider. But, you know, subtlety is always the key here for most of this. You kind of learn that real quick, huh? And then we're going to move on to the pads. And basically what the entire portion of the pads are for is just to kind of do the breakdown or bridge section of the track. So that's mainly what I've had them in there for. We can look at them on the mixer, and there's nothing. This has literally no EQ. It's just a high pass on it. Same with this one, I believe. This does have a little high pass on it. Well, an external one, so just kind of, you know, same thing. EQ, nothing really done here. So these, nothing much done, but just volume. And that's really about it for the pads. There's not much else. Of course, there's the side chain, but the side chain is applied to almost all of my tracks unless I exclusively turn it off for some reason or another. And interestingly enough, when the pads go off, there isn't even any side chain going off at the time, so it's just on there just by default. It's not even doing anything. Next section here, we're going to focus on the melody. I'm not sure what's wrong with my voice today. Melody, and what we're going to do is just look at the guitars and what I've done with them. These are all, I believe, Nexus presets. Let me double check. Indeed. And basically, the melody is something I created kind of off the top of my head, and it kind of repeats out through the entire version of the track as it goes along. There's a layer to the main melody, and then there's a third layer in which it's more of a kind of a way to carry the rhythm of the track as it's playing. That's kind of my reasoning behind it. We'll start with the first little guitar layer here. So I have it running through a compressor, and then I have it running through some EQ here. Just did this mostly to taste, and then it's running through, of course, a side chain to kind of keep along with the track. Sometimes with the side chains, I'll sometimes disable them for melodies, believe it or not, just because I like those to cut through. Like, I don't want anything touching those. But in this case, I kept it as it was. So this is the main melody. And it's kind of real simple. It's nothing too complicated. This next little bit right here is the layer that kind of adds on to the top of this. It's more of a kind of a dressing on the top of my guitar melody. And this is just this will keep the melody carrying on as the progression goes on throughout the track. As we approach EQ, there's not much going on here, just a high pass, and then I boosted it in the 1000, 1200 hertz area. That was completely to taste. Can't really explain that. A little bit of stereo applied to it, and then of course there is some sidechain as well. We'll go to the third layer of the melody, and this is just what carries it on through. So it's very like rhythmic. And as it plays throughout the track, it makes more sense, you know, in context. There is a little bit of high pass going on, and I squeezed out some more of the mids. I felt like it probably had a little too much going on in there. And altogether, you know, it just kind of creates see how it all kind of comes together with that. And this right here is just a little cutoff, which I'm automating the pretty sure I'm low passing this knob right here. I'm just turning it down as it plays, and that's it for the melody. It does change in the bridge area here, in which this is actually my original MIDI, and then the rest of all these MIDIs are just a culmination of what I've done with the MIDIs. But as such, because, you know, I feel like the original is what, you know, if it wasn't for the original, you wouldn't have the whole song. So I dedicated my entire bridge just to that melody. And you can see, you know, it's super floaty, wavy, just like I like it. All right, let's move on to the bass. It's really simple. First and foremost, there's never much. I don't do too much bass work unless I'm just really in a bassy mood, you know. But mostly this is just for carrying my track along, you know. Really simple stuff. There's a harmless patch that I've created here, and it's a super simple patch, default, with the cutoff lowered, no filter amount, no unison, and then the third harmonic, I kind of pushed it up until it felt right. There's never really a specific setting. It just kind of feels right as I'm creating it. Typically do that with basses. I don't go too crazy. Sometimes I may also add a little bit of like saturation or something to give it a little bit more presence in the mix. The basses then ran through an EQ here, a little bit of dip in the mids, because for some reason basses always seem to have a little problem around there whenever I mess with them. Maybe it's just me. And then I have some volume automation going on. And of course it's running through the sidechain. And that's it for that. The notes are the exact same. They're the root notes of the progression. And then there's a sustained version that plays along during the breakdown. I believe that's it. There is some bus compression on the end, in which it's mostly just for gluing it all together. Or just kind of bringing up the volume just a little bit without, you know, overcrowding my other buses. Okay, we'll move on to the drums and break down each little element of that. Of course, there's your standard kick here. If I can click on it. It's just a regular kick I found. Trimmed out the fade out a little bit to tame the tail a little bit. Usually most of the kicks have a little too much tail that I prefer. Sometimes it's fine, but other times it's not. I just turned it to taste. And then of course there is some EQ with the mid scooped out a little bit as well. The kick is ran through mono, and that's really probably it for the kick. Oh no, that's not it. There is more. If you look here, there is a little high pass going on in the kick, in which I automated the filter here and ran it through a high pass, kind of sort of, you see, and then it drops it down as it gets into the main bit. Then we can move on to the hats part of the drums, and they're mostly just put into taste. A little bit of EQ might be on here. Yeah, it's actually no EQ really. It's just a low high pass. I didn't do anything really much to it. And then a volume automation, of course, to control the level as it goes in and out. No kind of extra EQ. And then there is the snares or claps. Here's my snares, claps, and then there shouldn't be much EQ to this either. Yeah, a little boost in the treble or present section of it. Same here, just a high pass. No EQ there, so relatively little processing. I run all the drums here through a kind of like a drum bus compressor, and usually I trim these up until they kind of match with the music. Honestly, that's really my whole point behind it. And then there is a little reverse clap sound that I added that just at the end of every 4 bars there is this little reverse clap here or section that kind of swoops it up, prepares you for the next section. And that's it. Relatively simple. Sometimes I don't really get too complicated with drums. I just kind of do it to what it fits rather than try to do anything too special or crazy. And lastly, I'm going to move on to the effects. The effects are the same. There's not much going on there in the effect sides besides just kind of dragging them in, mixing them to the appropriate level, and then I might run them through the do some reverb as well. But yeah, just one of them's going through reverb. EQ is usually the same. I just usually cut the lows if need to be, or trim out anything that's excess. Sometimes I don't EQ much at all. Nothing going on there. A little bit of low pass, and that's it. These are your standard samples. And this right here is just a 3x OSC white noise, just the white noise generator. And then I'm automating these X and Y knobs. And that's kind of culminates it all together. This little effect here is just a little boomy sound to give a little bit more punch to when the breakdown appears. That's why I use that. That's kind of my reasoning behind using that. And that's about it. Let me see. There is a little bit of FS. This is running to the reverb as well. And that's it. Alright, that concludes each element and breakdown of my track sphere. I hope that I was able to tell you something or show you something that kind of helps you along your productions as well. And this track itself is entirely free to download. But if you want maybe a higher quality version of it, or maybe you want the stems or the MIDI files to this, then you can just check out my Patreon page and get more information about how to do that. As always, I really appreciate you sticking along and checking out my track. Really, I just hope you enjoy it, and I really hope it makes you feel better, or makes you feel like your day is going to go a little bit better. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and thanks for hanging with the Cool Breeze.